Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strategic Note-Taking Workshop by the University Advising and Academic Support Center. And we are Rocky's Resources presenting today about strategic note-taking. So the goal of today's lesson here is to really, hopefully that students will be able to identify some techniques that can assist them in taking notes of their classes. So hopefully this will help you with note-taking from your classes. This is not specifically designed for note-taking from readings. So we actually do have a reading techniques workshop that addresses reading and retaining information from readings a little bit more there. And we also have a memory techniques workshop, which is a little more different in helping you to remember what you're learning. But here today, we're going to work on some specific note-taking strategies to help you stay organized and to help you in making your notes really worthwhile. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about why we take good notes, note-taking as a product versus note-taking as a process. And then we'll have some active note-taking tips throughout this presentation as well, and several different methods in order to take active notes. So a lot of people might relate to this. Not sure if I take notes to read them later or to never look at them again. This is something that a lot of students have trouble with, that they take notes and they just never look at them again, and they might say that, oh, I don't need it for the exam, or it never really was required, or they might just forget about the notes. Like when you're studying, if you get a study guide or exams are on certain chapters, you might not think to look back to your notes. So hopefully today you'll understand why it's important to look back at your notes, not just once when the time you take them and never looking at them again. So thinking to yourself as we start this process, how do you take notes right now, if at all? Do you even take notes in class? That's a really important thing, because that learning curve of taking active note-taking could be a huge learning curve for you, or it could be, making some minor tweaks here and there to how you already take notes. But hopefully keeping an open mind to some ways that we can encourage some active note-taking. And also thinking about how you learn to take notes in the way that you do now. Is this something that you've gradually learned over time? Have you ever been to a note-taking workshop before? Is this something that you've learned from friends or classmates? So thinking about that, and also taking it, everything that we've talked about today with a grain of salt, in that there's no one perfect system for everyone. So there's not one note-taking system I'll show you today that is going to fit exactly what you need, but hopefully you can tweak and adjust it based on what you already know about yourself and your learning style. So why is it important to take good notes? Well, first of all, note-taking is a great place to start for studying. Whenever you have an exam, a quiz, anything ahead of you in class, it's a great idea to review your notes, and not just to review them one time, but we'll talk a lot today about how repetition is really important with note-taking and reviewing those notes multiple times. But your notes should be one of the first places that you go to when you start to study. Whether those notes are from class or from your readings, note-taking is really, really important for studying. Also, some examples to help with understanding. So this is really pertinent in math and science, but it's also relevant for other classes as well. But thinking about math, if you have an example of a problem that you did in class, and then you have 5 more problems to do just like that on your homework, hopefully you'll be able to model that after the problem that you have in your notes. So that's why it's really important to review those notes so you can see the steps that your professor or your teaching assistant took as they were showing you the problem. So this is really important to help with the understanding. And again, repetition is good for the brain. So continually reviewing these notes, not just once, not just the day you take them, and maybe not even just the day before the exam, but multiple times in between there, so that they really sink in for you to remember. So when notes are treated as a product. So some students assume that having notes means that they've actually learned the material. And so this is not really the case. So just because you have notes doesn't mean that you've really learned it. So this is where that repetition comes in. And we'll talk about that active note-taking and note-taking as a process as well. So students usually copy and paste the material and call it good. So this is another way that notes can be treated as a product. So if you're copying exactly what the professor says into your notebook, never looking at it again until maybe the night before you study, that's not really learning the material, and you're not really individualizing it for yourself and making it something that you can learn from. So it's a really good idea to copy and paste the material that your professor has or your teaching assistant, but also to go back and review that material, ask yourself questions about that material, really work to engage with the material. So this is, before we go into note-taking as a process, we'll talk about this process of note-taking. So sometimes if your professor goes a little fast, Some students might hold up their cell phone and take pictures, as you can see in this photograph here. So how often do you maybe do this? And it's okay, you know, some professors do go a little too fast for you to get everything down, and it is important to have that information, but how often do you really do this and go back to those notes? And it's one thing to go back to them and maybe scan over the photos, but if you have, you know, 20 photos of notes, are you really going to learn that material, and would it, you know, benefit you, you know, that much more to really copy those notes into your notebook or type them out even onto your laptop, iPad, whatever it might be, but to really take the notes yourself? So that's really important to think about, because that's almost worse than just writing the notes and not looking at them again, is taking a photo and never looking at it again, because then you're not even getting that practice and that memory of writing down the notes. So making sure if you do take photos in class, if that's allowed by your instructor, that you actually go back and review those photos and take those notes. So when notes are treated as a process, this is really important to view the act of taking notes as learning, not just having the notes as learning. So making sure that you're taking these notes and that you are, again, asking questions. We'll kind of go over some other active note-taking tips, but asking questions that you are trying to learn from the notes, not just blanketly absorb everything that is being given to you for note-taking. So students also treat the note-taking process as creators of memories. This is the idea that you're working to take these notes to learn and that you're trying to remember. And hopefully this will be more than a long-term memory that you'll develop, because you'll continually review these notes. You'll know that you want to learn for your exam, for your major, for your career, whatever reason it might be that you have to learn these, what you're being given in these notes. Hopefully that will help you to remember a bit more. So here's some tips for active note-taking. So making sure, I've already said this, but making sure you're engaged. That's really important, to not just, you know, be on Twitter or, you know, watching TV, doing something whenever you're taking notes, if it is like an online class or even in person, making sure that you're engaged and really focused on the material too, and that you're, you know, kind of quizzing yourself, asking questions. Do I understand this? Does this make sense? Could I answer a multiple choice question about this right now? Could I write an essay about this right now? Asking yourself some questions. Also, active note-taking uses a system, and we'll discuss some systems later in the presentation. And again, not every system will work for you, but, you know, hopefully maybe taking pieces of different systems, using different ones for different classes, and kind of, you know, meshing that together with what the system that you already have in place to take them. Also balancing efficiency and effectiveness. So efficiency, if you're shorthanding everything and writing down really quickly because your professor maybe is going a little fast for you, that's great that you're getting the notes down, but, you know, are you then risking that you might not be able to read those notes later? And then what's the point of having the notes if you can't read or understand them later? Versus effectiveness, if you are highlighting everything, you're indenting, you're maybe writing in different fonts like as you go, but then you're not getting everything down because you're taking too long to really organize while you're note taking, that also hurts you because then you're not getting the full notes. So making sure that you're balancing this efficiency and effectiveness idea. Also, some initial tips for active note-taking. So again, I've said this and I'll keep saying it because this kind of is drilling in that point that you're reviewing notes multiple times over time. So I'm saying this to you multiple times over the time of this presentation, how important it is that you review your notes the day you take them, and then multiple days before your exam. And not just like 3 days before the exam, but maybe you're looking back at each set of notes that you take, you know, a couple of times a week or every day. If it takes, you know, 5-10 minutes that you spend reviewing some notes that you take, that can really just help you to engage and remember those important points that you took in your notes. Also restating in your own words. So this could be asking questions. This could be, if there's a really long like paragraph example, can you say this in your own words? That would really make more sense for you. Or could you connect it with some existing knowledge, like giving a real life example, something that you can tie this back to, another class you maybe learned similar material in, something like that to really help pin down that connection for you. Also, writing down some questions as you take notes or asking your professor. So if you're in class taking notes and you have a question, you can write that as you're writing down the notes. Like if you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, or if it's a recorded lecture or something like that, but then making sure that you circle that and go back to it so that you do get that question answered And a lot of times we think, oh, I'll remember to ask that question later, or maybe it'll make sense later. And maybe it will make sense later, but oftentimes we forget about that question as we keep going. And so it's important, if you can't ask immediately, like at the time, to write that down so that you remember to ask that question later, or that this is maybe an area that you need to study a bit more because you didn't understand it as well initially. But overall, the goal of active note-taking is to learn. So keeping that in mind and remembering that that's why you're really here for active note-taking. Okay, so this is an example of some notes. And I mean, this happens a lot. Students will write down sentences with a pencil or like a pen in their notebook, and it'll look just like this, like a sentence at a time. Not a lot really going on here, and it's the notes, right? But these are the same notes on this slide. And you can see just so many differences between these. So you'll notice that there's some bolding, which if you are handwriting notes, it's obviously a little hard to do, but you can still underline, you can still highlight. Bullet points are really helpful, indenting. These are all really helpful tips that can help make your notes just that much stronger. And so then if you're trying to glance across this page and find something, it's so much harder than if you're looking at this page and you're trying to find something. Color coding is also important too. If you wanted to use yellow highlighter, that's great, but maybe you want to use orange and pink and purple too. Whatever works for you to kind of help you remember and get that message across to yourself, and something that you can then maybe glance at a little quicker to get your brain working and understanding the points a bit faster. So the Cornell system. This system is the first of the three that we'll talk about today for note-taking. So this has 3 sections. So the right box that you'll see on the side here is where you actually take your notes. And then on the left, you'll have your main ideas. So maybe you'll have a word and then a definition, or a word and then 2 parts, or multiple pieces that go with that word, or maybe there's an umbrella term here, or a person for history, multiple things about that person. So, this is kind of like back and forth between the left and right side here. And then at the very bottom, you'll focus on the main ideas. So this is really summarizing what you think is likely to be on the exam, and also summarizing like the notes there. So you could kind of then really learn from that. And if you were going back and reviewing for exams, you could look at your summaries and then go back up to this top information to really get more detail. The next system is PowerPoint slides, and this won't work for every class because not every instructor posts their slides online. However, if they do, there's a really cool way to print the slides. In the print settings, it'll be under print all slides, and then you can change the slides to 3 slides per page for the handouts. And this will allow you to have these little lines here to actually take notes next to the completed slides. And I do understand that not all professors will post on Western Online, and then not all of them will do it before class either. But if they do, this is a really good tool to have, and something that hopefully you can really use. So that way you're not having to maybe rush so fast to get your notes down, but instead you can highlight on the notes that they provided for you and write your own questions, comments, engagements, other things like that on the sides. So, or draw pictures, write down an example the professor is giving verbally that's not in the notes, that kind of thing. And then a mind map. So this is a really involved process and is more of a study tactic than a note-taking process. However, some people really adapt this well and they love it, and this is how they take their notes. But it really depends on you, depends on also the course too. So not everything that we're going through is going to work for all courses and all people, right? So let's take a subject like I mentioned history earlier, so we'll just roll with it. We'll say history. So let's say we're having to learn about the president, and so we'll pick we'll say George Washington. So the topic might be George Washington. Maybe you'll write the years he was president and the different keywords or things you might need to know about him. And let's say you're going to compare that to Samuel Adams. So you will talk about, all the different presidents and go back and forth so that this is really a mind map in the sense that you can quickly see the different subjects you're trying to study, and then the different main ideas and the different keywords. It's just a very quick way to compare different things. I've had students use this for like botany, so like with plants too, if you're trying to compare different types of plants, or with zoology, with animals, different things like that. But being creative with this is a much more creative mind map note-taking process. So again, and this doesn't have to be for every single class or even for every single time you take notes in a specific class, but hopefully this can help you for studying your notes and stuff going forward. So some other tips and tricks. Evernote is a wonderful application. You can install this on your computer, your smartphone, your iPad, those kinds of things. And it is a virtual notebook, basically. So you can create multiple notebooks. If you have like multiple classes, you can type up your notes in there. And one thing that's really cool is that then you can use Control F if you have a PC, or Command F if you have a Mac. And then let's say you were trying to look for mitochondria, you could type in mitochondria, and then you'd be able to see all the times that you talked about the mitochondria in your notes. And if you're trying to look for that, you could just find it really easily. And then you can have all your notes from previous semesters. So like, let's say you're taking Chem 201, and then the next semester you had to take Chem 202. You'd then have that notebook, virtual notebook, accessible to you even after you're done with Chem 201 if you needed that information for some reason in Chem 202. Just as like an example of more of like a sequence class. So you could also do a similar thing with Google Docs. It's a little less organized as far as like notebooks, but you could definitely make folders and then make a Google Doc, have the dates, especially that you're taking these notes. So if you know the date, hopefully you'll be able to then connect what exam that was for, versus if you just have notes and you're taking them and it's, you know, September versus if it's November. If it's for the final, that's fine. But if you don't remember what you learned and when you needed to know it for, that can maybe help us by including the dates. Also, keeping in mind that Microsoft Office Suite is free as a Western Illinois University student. So you can Google WIU Microsoft Office Suite, or type in this link here, and you can download PowerPoint, Word, Excel, all for free while you're a Western student. So that's a fun thing to keep in mind too. And hopefully all of these will help you. The other good thing about Evernote and Google Docs is just that you can really access it from anywhere. And then Word has an option for that too, for like Microsoft Online. So that you could access it from any computer, even if you're like using the computer lab versus in your room or off campus, that kind of thing. So lastly, it's important to remember that note-taking is not necessarily an isolated process. So thinking about this, if you get frustrated or you're feeling discouraged, keep in mind that you're not alone, right? And so you can, hopefully you'll reach out. So reaching out to your professors, your friends, your classmates, tutors, also very important, and any other support system that you have to help you through, to help you find answers, other ways to approach things, different solutions. So just make sure that you remember that you're not in this alone and that there are people here to help you. So thank you so much for listening today. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can email us at rockiesresources@wiu.edu. Thank you and have a great day.